Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SB Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from acts Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars titled Die With A Smile. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on YouTube. Now this has got 1 billion views. That's crazy. So this is an incredibly popular song and we're going to listen through it from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. I've been looking forward to talking about this one for a while, so let's go. I do quite like this song. Straight into it.
Just woke up from a dream where you and I had to say goodbye, and I don't know what it all means, but since I survived I realized wherever you go, that's where I'll follow.
And the bass enters so nicely.
Promise tomorrow, so I'ma love you every night like it's the last night, like it's the last night. If the world was ending, I'd wanna be next to you.
Fantastic head voice there. I mean, it's a stunning audio-visual experience with the video, seeing both Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga on the screen there with the attire and everything is fantastic. But it's just such a tight first part of it with Bruno Mars at the helm. Great 16th notes on the hi-hats there. Fantastic parallel major there. Quiet vibrato.
Right next to you. Next to you. Right next to you.
It's great to have another solo element here, you know, on the leads. It's just phenomenal, man.
I'd wanna be next to you.
Absolutely incredible song. Absolutely incredible piece. We're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from acts Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars, titled Die With A Smile. Now, before we get into the overall song analysis, what is this track about? First of all, I think this song is about two people. First of all, Bruno Mars and then Lady Gaga, communicating how, despite everything that's going on around them, all the chaos, all the conflict, all the difficulties, the words that we scream, etc., how their love is the one worth fighting for. Die with a smile, spending the last moments with each other. And there's something incredibly beautiful about that. The way it's sung makes it seem incredibly authentic. But it's also just the messaging itself, which I feel like anyone who's ever been in a relationship like this will be able to relate to. The world around you might be burning, but as long as you're with that special person, that's what makes you happy. And I feel like I'm maybe even simplifying it a little bit, but like oversimplifying it, should I say. But it's just a really accessible story that I think will appeal to a lot of people. And I think that it's meticulously shot and resonates with me on a level. It touched me on a certain level, and I think that's part of why, but it's beautiful. I think it goes without saying that the vocal performances from both Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars in this are exceptional. Not only do we show exemplary vocal technique and our hidden chest voice, wonderful legatos and vibratos there, very comfortable with our dynamic range and how we express ourselves. There's a degree of authenticity with not only the way that we show a vocal fry when necessary, a little bit extra oomph, and the vocal harmonies are absolutely exquisite there. Some of the way they play with chromatics outside the diatonic there, especially in like the I can't do it justice, that kind of extension in the outro chorus, or within the second chorus, even when they start to come together. It's just wonderful how they put those forward. And I adore the effort put into making those lead vocal points all the more sort of entrancing. I love it to pieces. There are different styles of vocalists there, but I feel they complement each other very well with their very own textures and timbres. That the actual overall sound of it is beautiful, and the way that we harmonize with the other instruments within the arrangement as well is captivating. It was also just great to step away and allow that lead guitar in that solo section there to kind of have its own moment there, if only for a few bars. I think the call and responses that we had between Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga at times were tremendous as well, almost like they were having a conversation with each other. It just makes it seem all the more sort of like real. It's a really great, solid effort, very well thought out and well produced. But then you get into the actual crux of the song itself, outside of the way the vocals and the story was told, and you have everything else within this track, which is incredible. You have that very wistful, clean strummed guitar at the start there. You can kind of imagine Bruno Mars on their own on stage, sort of speaking of their experience after they woke up from a dream. It's filtered in a way where it almost seems like it's far away, like it is something you've just imagined. It's very kind of wistful, and there's an interesting tone to the seventh chords, which insinuate a complexity to the position that they're in there, trying to work the stuff out, like they're struggling to cope with what's going on, but they will go through it to be with this person. And then you have the bass that comes in the low end as it goes in further into the track. And the bass, develops that low end really well and doesn't just stick with the root notes. It explores the scales and modes respective to it. It not only navigates the lower range, goes up an octave a little bit and kind of fiddles about. And it has room to do that because of how well things are niched within the frequency spectrum. There's like a tambourine or a shaker that comes in and accents certain beats to add a sense of groove to it as we move forward. But it's very, very sort of like minimalist instrumentally at the early stages because we're trying to get the hang of the story, at least from Bruno Mars' perspective. I think as we go through the piece, there are some interesting sort of slightly crispy kind of guitar melodies or ideas there that add a little bit of sizzle, a little bit of kind of grit to it, but not too much. It's a very gentle guitar tone there, almost kind of like rock of the 1950s, so to speak. It harks back, as well as from the music video itself, it harks back to a nostalgia that I can't necessarily relate to music from that era. There was no real heavy stuff, although what I would say is, if you were to change the tones of the instruments, you could get some really heavy music out of this, but that isn't the point here. It's not meant to weigh you down. But just I like the crispiness of the guitar tone and how it kind of is a nice little mild bit of development from the cleaner tones we had previously. I also appreciate what we're trying to do with those guitar parts there, playing some bluesy or pentatonic oriented stuff there, not just to capture some of the sort of more dominant guitar styles of the time, but also to kind of invoke the sense of bluesy kind of sadness that we have there. I just thought that was cool as well. And I think the drums, when they come in with the acoustic kit, I mean, the acoustic kit is just a no-brainer for this kind of music. I don't think you could have gotten away with 808s and sort of dubstep drums, but just to be able to have the sound of those hi-hats, the snares, the kicks, the crashes, etc., that kind of old school tone there is fantastic. I think it grounds the style of music that we're doing. It's almost like a nostalgic tone that people across the generations can get behind. I appreciate the development on the percussion as well that we had with the 16th note grooves as well and the hi-hats later onto the piece. I thought that was fantastic. It was nice to have more of that going on. I think that, you know, with the drum kit, if you can control the dynamics and have those quieter hits there, it can just sort of seem like there's more going on, but not in the way where it pushes itself too much. And there might have also been an organ or a keyboard in there as well, just primarily because I can see Lady Gaga in it. But whatever we're doing on the keys for a lot of the song is more sort of like based around a similar partner-free spectrum to a lot of the guitar parts there. So there's almost like a hum or a glow of it that you can hear almost to kind of round out the sound and add a bit of magic to it, but it's not too dominant. Although you can definitely hear the keys in interlude section before the solo part there, where we're articulating further those triads within the chord progressions that have previously been there. It's just kind of splitting them up across different notes and having a different representation of them to add further to the mix and also to make up. Almost like maybe the piano or the guitar have come together at that point, with Lady Gaga on the piano and then Bruno Mars on the guitar. So that makes sense to me. I think that's really cool if that is the case. I just also want to comment on that sort of solo that we have after that interlude there where things go down. Fantastic use of dynamic range, but just for it to play notes or melodies or patterns similar to where we're singing within previous verse or chorus parts, there is almost like it's a very old school way of soloing there where it kind of harkens back to a style of the time in the mid 20th century, but it's also one of the fundamentals of soloing is to kind of do something, you take that in core melody or sequence and kind of make it your own for the instrument. The use of reverb tails with delays on there kind of add a misty kind of atmospheric tone to it, which is kind of sweet. And because things come up during that period, it's almost like a celebration of the fact that we're maybe going to come together at that point. But it's also just that it doesn't also overcomplicate the solo section. Like you don't get a lot of really crazy wild guitar solos in pop music nowadays. So it was a nice, I think, midpoint between not having a solo and having a wild one. I think that was a good choice. And I think finally you just have that last chorus section there where I really appreciate that we're taking the harmonies as the focal point, turning them in a direction where the rest of the instruments follow along with that movement there, almost like the backing band is kind of caught by surprise at their sudden display of passion, and then they kind of roll with that and then peak out. And it's just a beautiful song. I don't know if I've spoken about this the way I usually would about the track, but I figured the best way to go through this journey would be to sort of do it from start till finish, just like what was heard. And overall, the theme of it, with the extensions, the complexities of those chord progressions, with the actual tones and timbres of the instruments used there, with the overall feel of it being very sort of gentle aside from the points where we kind of build due to the expression, the calling out, the crying out. I think it's a track where we are trying to cautiously tell the other person how we feel, but then inevitably it just comes to a breaking point where it just spills out, and then you have that solo section, and then which everyone knows and everyone's together, and you have those final moments together. So I think that overall the use of chord progressions there, the styles of what we're doing instrumentally with the instrumental performances there, I think the vocals are the icing on the cake, and they tell the story incredibly well, and you feel every single word is dripping with that. But it's just everything together paints this interesting aesthetic, and it's just a wonderful, unique experience that I haven't really had with that many pop songs, or at least not in a while. And I just think, as a final note, outside of the theme there, where again I've commented on it. I suppose a lot of the comments I made about the individual instruments and stuff like that, and the chord progressions there. I also want to mention that there are some parallel majors and minors within this that are outside of the normal expectations of the scales and key shapes. And I think we're typically using them either to intrigue and catch the interest of the listener, because when you do use a chord that's not expected, it's like, oh wow, what's that, etc. But I also think it's trying to sort of break away from maybe the sadness that we're feeling, almost like we're trying to look at the joy of being able to spend that time with that person, even if things are hell on earth. And so I think that's why we have some parallel majors in there to kind of sort of like tear away from that expectation of that mire. And I think having that instrumentally kind of makes sense for some of the words that we're saying. It's an interesting balance there that I feel is well kept. But my final comments are basically on a studio production, the recording, mixing, and mastering. It's exemplary, commercial grade, as you'd expect from musicians of this caliber at this level. I adore the way that the vocals have been recorded. I like the fact that we use kind of interesting filters to kind of have more of a high range, mid-range resonance with Bruno Mars's earlier parts. I like how we allow ourselves a full range later on there, wonderful compression, EQing, etc., use of reverbs across the instruments there. Their guitars, bass, drums, keys, etc., have been wonderfully captured within this piece there without being sort of like choked. I like the fact there's dynamic range, but you also aren't oversaturating these instruments with effects unless they're either for this kind of the atmosphere we want, again with those reverbs or like filters. There's even like a kind of an interesting kind of chorus on certain elements like a hero that was really interesting, but ultimately it was just stunning. And I think that it was nice and loud without pumping, so the bass compression limit was handled. I mean, effectively it's a commercial grade production, which I think captures a lot of the essence of the 1900s with the music industry then. We had the best of both worlds, being vintage and contemporary, and I'm glad I got the chance to finally talk about it. So thank you for watching my review of this track from Axe, Lady Gaga, and Bruno Mars, titled Die With A Smile, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as it need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP reviews. Spiderhands out.